Hello, and welcome to Oakville Matters. This is the Skype version of Oakville Matters. And with me today is Sherry Ford from Your TV. And Sherry is going to ask questions that have been on everybody's minds about COVID-19 and what the town is doing. And I'm going to answer them as best I can. Sherry, welcome to the show, and
Thank you.
thank you for being the voice of the people.
Well,
What's
thank you for having me. It's been a very interesting time for yourself and for everybody anywhere, quite frankly. Before I get into the questions on COVID-19, I'd like to know how you're doing and how your office is doing, because you must be inundated with questions and concerns.
So far, we're managing just fine. I have to say that our community has been isolating very successfully. The goal of the isolation was to drive down the growth of the virus so that we could ramp up our hospital and healthcare facilities before it was overwhelmed. And we've done such an outstanding job that I think we have spare capacity, and it looks like we're pretty smooth sailing here. I mean, that said, we've got at least 120 cases, and we've had two deaths that have been revealed, and we could argue that it's too many. But if you compare us to other jurisdictions, we can be pretty proud of ourselves.
Excellent. Now, a lot of concerns have been around long-term care facilities and retirement residents. And obviously, they have them in Halton. Can you tell me how that's going?
Sherry, thanks for the question. We've got about 70 confirmed cases in Halton's institutions and 9 deaths among residents or patients confirmed. And all of the deaths, 63 of the confirmed cases, were at the Mountain View residence, a retirement home in Halton Hills in Georgetown. Here in Oakville, we've got 1 case at each post-in village long-term care home and Waterford retirement home with no guests. So we're doing pretty well down here. I have to say that that's another sign of how seriously our population in Oakville has been taking the isolation advice.
Now, it's interesting that, the coronavirus states that, are showing us that this is very detrimental to seniors, but it's come to everybody's attention that it can hit any age. Can you break down the numbers of the age you're looking at for your corona numbers?
Well, it's been very interesting because when you look at the global statistics, it really does say that it hits men more than women and the elderly more than anyone else. But when you look locally in Halton, and this is possibly the result of the fact that we have so few. I mean, we're less than. I think we're running around 400, and 400 is not. If you're really into statistics, 400 is not a really big sample from which to draw conclusions. So just read off the category here. Under 19 years of age, we've got 9 cases and 13 probables, and that's a total of 22. In the 20 to 39 age group, we've got 77 confirmed and 13 probable for a total of 90. And from the 40 to 59-year-old level, which is, I hope that qualifies as middle-aged, we've got 140 confirmed cases and 20 probables for 160 total. And then when you get to the 60 to 79-year-olds, the number goes down to 81 with 10 probables for 91 total. And over 80, we've got 76 and no probables for a total of 76. And that's how you get to 439 total confirmed and probable. And when you look at that, you see that the biggest spike is in that 40 to 59 age group. And you see that the 20 to 39s are similar in size to the 60 to 79. Now, 60 to 79 is a similar age bracket. It's the same span of ages, but there are more people in the younger age bracket than there are in the older age bracket. A lot of people think that that our community skews older, but our community actually skews younger. Uh, and that's just a little known fact about Oakville and Halton.
I guess those are really, in a way, kind of frightening numbers to show you that anyone can get it. So everybody should be paying attention. And obviously, I'm a news junkie and I've been watching shows all over the place. And they talk about flattening the curve. Now, are we in a situation where we have had that the death rates have slowed down, or what is the death rate showing you?
Well, the death rates are not declining yet, but they do look stable when you look at the province. And locally, it's hard to say. On an Oakville basis, we've had 2 deaths that we know about. There's been a little bit of criticism of the how much information is being released locally. I don't certainly control that, but at any rate, of the deaths that we know about, only 2 in Oakville, and they were some time ago. So we could look like it could look like, if you look at that, like we're doing pretty well. There's been quite a clump of deaths in the northeast part of Halton in the Mountain View residents. So it's hard to say. But when you look around the world, what you see is cases decline before deaths decline, and that's because the cases that it takes longer for the deaths to happen, I guess, is the short way of saying it.
Now, obviously, it's cooler right now, but we are coming into spring and the weather is going to get nicer, and you want that curve to flatten. So, what do you say to Oakville residents now? Clearly they are listening. Your numbers are low. How do you hammer home that you have to continue to stay at home, or to safe distancing, or just go out if you really need to?
Well, those are the orders from the Premier under the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act, and those are being enforced by provincial decree. And the method is to politely ask people to conform, and only if they refuse to give them a ticket. So about a week ago, for example, we had 358 encounters between enforcement and the population, and 352 of them were congenial enough to comply with the directions from the province, and only 6 refused to cooperate and earn themselves a ticket. So I would say, as the weather warms up and the desire to get out more continues, we should be listening to the Premier. Yesterday he said that it's too soon to let up, and we've got a few more weeks to go. I personally, looking at the numbers, believe that we're on a downward slope in Ontario in terms of case generation. And a infectious disease doctor that I'm acquainted with tells me that there should be some increased suppression of the virus as the temperatures or the weather gets warmer. If it gets warm enough. And we'll see. We can be very hopeful that he's right.
Let's hope. Halton Healthcare is beginning to work with Oakville Trafalgar Hospital, Memorial Hospital, to make room for extra beds. Can you tell us about that?
Well, when we built that hospital, we built room in the hospital for 157 extra beds that would be finished and put in when we got to the point where we needed them. And that would be in the 80% private room mode that we created the rest of the hospital with. That space hasn't been used yet. And I think everybody's heard about the Joe Brant Hospital in Burlington building a tent outside their building to they called it decant their regular patients into that so that they could treat COVID cases in the hospital if they needed to. Well, so that's a field hospital, let's call it. So what Oakville Trafalgar Memorial Hospital is doing is building the equivalent of a field hospital in the unfinished floor of the hospital. So you'll be a little more comfortable in OTMH's field hospital. if it's needed. And as we say, knock wood or whatever you do for luck, pinch yourself. It's starting to look like maybe we won't need it. The promise always was, if we did a good enough job isolating, we wouldn't crash our healthcare system, and we wouldn't lose as many people as we would if we did crash our healthcare system. So it's looking like a success locally, and I'm just hoping that the 260 extra beds that we could put there won't be needed. And for comparison, I believe the Burlington Field Hospital tent is 160 beds approximately. So there you go. But OTMH draws people not only from Oakville, but from Halton Hills and Milton, even though there are smaller hospitals in each of those communities. And we even draw patients. It's a regional hospital. We draw patients from quite a way.
Well, it's great to be over-prepared for sure when something like this happens. Now, as you're over-preparing, are there funds coming from the community to help the hospital?
Yes, there's been, we have quite a generous community, and as is evidenced by the fact that residents of Oakville donated almost $70 million to the construction of the hospital. And they're still reaching deep. The OTMH COVID Response Fund has a goal of raising $3 million, and they're doing pretty well. And there are 3 long-term supporters of the Hospital Foundation who have pledged to give 15% of the goal. That is, they'll give $450,000 once we reach the 2.55 million mark. So there's a very clever form of matching. So there you go. Call up and make that donation now. Operators standing by.
I love all the celebrities like Haley Wickenheiser or Reynolds down in Hollywood trying to fundraise, trying to get protective gear in any way they can. And people are bringing protective gear everywhere into the communities all across Canada and doing their part. Are there any community drives happening right now in your area that are helping with the personal protective gear?
Yes, there are. There's a concern for the supplies of personal protective equipment for your family doctor. Your family doctors have, to keep their offices open and treat you, they need PPE, as we short form this. Mm-hmm. And their normal supplies have dried up. Normally, they buy on the private market, and of course, with hospitals in the province and Canada competing, they're having trouble getting it for their offices, and they're not part of the bigger program. So, Dr. Nadia Alam and Dr. Jim Kovacs, two family. Jim Kovacs is a family physician, and Nadia Alam is a multifaceted physician. She's an anesthesiologist. She's a palliative care doctor, and other things. She and he have organized a community drive. This is their address. It's an easy Gmail address, Oakville Community Drive @gmail.com. And they are collecting donations from businesses and individuals of gloves and gowns and shields and masks of all variety. And the depot for leaving those off is film.ca at 177 Spears Road in Oakville. And it's quite clever the way it's set up. An unused theater, because theaters are closed, is being used to sort and package up the little care packages for each doctor's office. And then the doctors drive up. There's a driveway right beside the back door to that theater. So it's literally a PPE drive-through. And, nobody has to break the physical distance that you're supposed to follow. It's like the McDonald's of PPE.
It's crazy, you know. I guess when you took this role to help the community, you never saw something like this ever going to happen and how you have to prepare yourself for this. But again, you have to be proud of what your community's doing.
Well, I am. And, it takes me back to when I was a teenager. I trained to be a lifeguard, and I enjoyed the heck out of that. And it is a little bit like being a mayor. You don't know what's going to walk out on the pool deck when you're a lifeguard, and you don't know what you're going to have to deal with. And being mayor more and more looks a lot like being lifeguard at the town pool.
And I guess, you see the best of people at this time. You really do. And the best definitely outshines the worst in people. But as you know, and as people can see, this protective gear that people are wearing to, go grocery shopping or out on a walk or going to do errands, and then they take off their rubber gloves or their face masks, and they don't want it in their car and they don't want it anywhere. So they just drop it on the side of the road. And that's a real disgusting, horrible problem.
There is here and there, you can see people demonstrating a degree of privilege and entitlement that is really thoughtless as to other people. I shake my head. It is extraordinary. I think 99.5% of the town are wonderful people, but here and there we've got a few savages among us who just do not think of other people, and I am always just blown away when I see it.
Now, is there a bylaw that you put in place for littering?
Well, we decided that we needed to up the penalty and make the stakes a little higher. So, now if a bylaw officer catches you or is able to trace it back to you, you've got a ticket that's pretty stiff, about $300. So don't get caught would be my advice. The best way to not get caught is don't do it.
I just don't understand. I mean, we've been taught since we were quite little not to litter, so I don't know why there'd be exceptions now.
Well, you want to go, who raised you?
Exactly. Now, social distancing or overcrowding or not paying attention to how close you are. I know it happened to me yesterday. I was in a store. There were maybe 3 of us. And a lady came up right behind me because she wanted exactly what I was looking at. And then she started to talk to me and she was literally on top of me. And I'm thinking, how do you not know what's going on? And as much as we try to get it out there that you're not allowed to do what she did, it's happening. And it's happening outside, on trails, on, walking past, sidewalks. How is that looking for you right now, especially as this, the sun is starting to come out and we are going to get good weather? How do you keep social distancing and how do you drive that home?
Well, I would say that it's a gigantic problem for you when it happens to you, but in the aggregate, when you look at the big numbers, there's more than 200,000 people in the town of Oakville, and there's only dozens, barely hundreds of people exhibiting this bad behavior. And the first thing you do when it happens to you is step back and say, please stay at least 6 feet away from me. I mean, it's really plain and simple. You don't ask if they've heard it or not. And if you want to be, there's books that suggest ways to correct people. And if the direct order, please stay 6 feet away from me is the bluntest. An alternative is to say, it endangers me, it makes me feel bad, or something like that. I don't like you being closer than 6 feet is the secondary sort of way to say it. But ask in a courteous and civil way for the person to back off.
Well, I kind of coiled up and I kind of walked away, and then she wanted to have a conversation. I'm like, we're not friends right now. This is really difficult for me, and you're right on me.
So now I don't have it handy, but I have a mask that our face covering. I'm reluctant to call it a mask, but let's call it a mask for ease of talking about it. It's a colorful, fashionable little thing.
I was wearing one.
and so that protected her from you, and hopefully she saw your example.
Oh man. Now, if you see a crowd of children or adults doing things like rollerblading or anything, you don't call 911. What are the numbers that you call so that, obviously there can still be safety, but if you have concerns, who do you call?
The number, which I have used so often now that I've
Really?
memorized it. So all numbers are 905 here.
Okay.
So just make it easy. It's 825-4722. And if you want 905-825-4722.
Okay.
And that is the police hotline for COVID. But before you call the police, try a courteous civil intervention of your own. Just say, please don't get so close, or whatever. But we have bylaw officers and police out in force monitoring our parks and our recreation facilities and our parking lots, all those things that are closed except for passing through. And they will also be enforcing these rules in the courteous way that I'm describing. First, educating and asking, and then if you're silly enough to refuse an order, you're going to get a ticket. I mean, we had a gentleman from Mississauga at the start of this who came all the way over from Mississauga to drive into a closed park, and there was happened to be a police officer there at the gate, and 3 times the police officer told him stop, and 3 times the guy ignored him, and then he gave the police officer lip. I don't know who gives armed police officers lip, but apparently there are such people. And,
Wow.
and that friendly visitor from Mississauga got a $880 lesson in not bringing lip to Halton.
Which makes you go, who raised you again? There's that question. But what you had me at, and I can't really gloss over, is that you've called that number a few times. So there has to be a story as to why you've called that number a few times.
No, there's no real story. I get asked the number so many times that I say it more often than I use it. But you do memorize it very quickly, 825-4722.
Now, my friend and I were talking yesterday. She has 2 cottages that she rents out. Obviously, COVID-19 is having an effect on these, and the weather's getting nicer. And what are those rules for, your free time? And can you rent cottages or visit cottages? Or what are you recommending to the Oakville people?
Well, the Premier's rules on that are what rule. And right now, if you consult ontario.ca for the COVID rules, you'll find that the guidance on cottages is a little bit, it's a little bit mixed. So it doesn't say you can't do it. It just says you shouldn't. And the way this has been working for the 6 weeks, it's almost 6 weeks that we've been going through this, is the authorities, the higher authorities, Canada and Ontario, the first thing they do is they signal what we want, what they want our behavior to be. And then if we're most of us behaving, they sort of leave it at that. And if too many people are ignoring the advice or the gentle request, the signal, then they bring in a order ordering you not to do it, and they set up a deterrent level of fine. And that deterrence and flat order about cottages, the last time I looked, which was last night, was still not on the website. So they've left room for things like, let's say you need to go up every so often to check on the water or whatever. There's a lot of different issues around keeping a cottage in good, in proper maintenance.
With flooding and stuff, you have to go up there.
Yeah, so they've allowed for that, and they've asked people to respect the idea that the community where your cottage is doesn't have the infrastructure to support extra people who get ill and and they and if there's a presumption that if you're going up there and you need something and you go to the hardware store and you happen to be one of the people that's carrying the virus, then you've spread it into a community that isn't able to handle it as well as your own community. So those are the sort of nice reasons why we're being encouraged not to go. So it's a little bit like the other rule locally, which is stay home, don't go out unless you really have to, and don't go out as often as you might like. Uh, go shopping once a week. These are all gentle requests. They're not ironclad orders. And now that the results of our isolating ourselves are starting to look so good, I don't think we're going to get a tougher set of rules on that. It's looking like what we're being told yesterday and today is keep the course. It's working. So I think that's the hopeful note that I will end this session of Oakville Matters on. And I would ask you, first I'll thank you for being with us, Sherry, and you who are watching, I want to thank you for watching. And if you have questions or suggestions, you can always reach me at mayor@oakville.ca, and I will be happy to connect you with the help you need, and I'll be happy to take your questions and let them inform the next issue of Oakville Matters. Until I see you the next time, here's looking at you, and stay well, keep safe, and never let the opportunity go by to let me know how I can help you. I'm here to help. Thanks a lot.